We are here for HATTR, amyloidosis, which is a hereditary version or variant. In particular, your variant is the V122I.
I didn't claim.
That's your cheating. We got your but, on the slide, for people here, it says catching HTTR amyloidosis is early save life. That's one of our key messages. Our other key message here is that wellness therapies support livable lives, right? Mm-hmm. And so my job, if I move to this little slide that has origami on it, and for those over here there, you can't quite see it, but maybe I'll just kind of move this so everybody can have a little bit of fun with us here. I'm cheating. I'm looking at a laptop down here. No. But if you look at these two images on the slide here, we've got like Yoda origami on the left, which is pretty darn good Yoda, if you ask me. But we also have that white piece of paper there, which is also Yoda origami. But it's kind of like origami success versus origami fail. And I bring this up because if we're talking about amyloidosis and what it is to people that aren't necessarily scientists, we have proteins, and amyloidosis is pretty much that proteins fold up like origami and they make a Yoda. But sometimes they don't fold so well. And if they don't fold properly, the shape's not right. And if the shape's not right, or if it is unfolded and then not folded back up together the same way, it doesn't have the same function. It doesn't have the same action in the body. So an unstable protein misfolding is kind of at the core of what happens in the body and amyloidosis. And if we kind of move on to the next slide, what we're looking at is another way to talk about that is a key. So I used to do proteomics back in the day. Here in the Bay Area, everything's full circle for the company named Aplera. They did proteins on the applied biosystem science and side, and Solera was the genomics side. And when we talked about proteins in the body, we talked about them like a key, and if they're bent or, slightly miscut, they don't fit in the lock properly. They don't actually turn the lock, and so they don't perform their function. And if I kind of move to the next slide, this is where we get very techy, but TTR and Dr. Alexander, I'm going to let you say this, transthyretin. This is like going to all different cultures, and it's like, where's the emphasis on the word transthyretin? So transthyretin, and this is where, let's dialogue here, Dr. Alexander. Ultimately, what we're seeing here on this slide is we've got transthyretin, and it's got 4 exact units that are exactly the same. But in genetics, in the HATTR, which is the hereditary ATTR, that 4-part protein destabilizes and it starts to break down. And when it breaks down, on the slide, you can see it's a tetramer because it's got 4 parts. And then it breaks down from 4 parts to just 2 parts, and that's a dimer. And then those 2 parts break down into just 1 part, a monomer. Mono is 1. And so then that monomer, it kind of continues to break down and it loses its shape. And when it loses its shape, it kind of goes, well, I got to get back to looking like a Yoda. And it tries to refold, but it looks like bad Yoda. And then it starts clumping together. And when it clumps together, it ultimately aggregates, which is clumping. And then that clumping ends up forming what we call a fibril. And fibril are maybe these longer pieces that we see, which are those long blue lines on our slide, but they are very sticky and they like to stick to different tissues. And the different tissues that they stick to are our heart, our liver, our kidneys, all sorts of things. So I'm going to pause for a second Dr. Alexander, should I do a reasonably good job of explaining what happens with TTR and proteins and breaking down in this fold?
You said the transthyretin protein is what we call a tetramer, so 4 pieces of protein that are stuck together. It's mostly produced by the liver, and so it circulates throughout the body. And normally what it does is it helps to transport vitamin A and thyroid hormone throughout the body. So it's kind of like a carrier, like an Uber driver that's kind of taking things to where it needs to be, nutrients to where they need to be. And, the big kind of initial step in this disease is when those tetramers break apart, like you said, into the monomers. Why they break apart, there's a number of reasons that we understand and reasons that we don't understand as well. We know that people that have the hereditary form of this, that one of those building blocks in that protein, amino acid, is just slightly different. And so that Yoda analogy, just one of those creases is bent in a little bit different way. And that's enough to, in some cases, make that protein more unstable and more likely to form amyloid. We know that there's also other factors probably related to age, related to gender or sex, and then probably environmental things that also promote those tetramers to break apart. And so there's a lot more research that needs to be done to understand those key pieces, because I would say that the mutation does increase the risk of developing amyloid, but there's lots of other things that usually contribute as well. Mm-hmm. And so, our group and others are doing a lot of research to try to understand that. Mm-hmm. And so, once they do break apart, then they start to clump together and form these amyloid fibrils that can deposit in different places in the body. And because it's in the bloodstream, there's a potential that it can go to more than one place. And that's also something else we don't have a great understanding of, why sometimes the proteins go to the heart, sometimes they go to the nerves, sometimes they go to tendons and ligaments, or all the above. Mm-hmm. Everyone's a little bit different. And so kind of what drives that, we still need to do a lot of work. And in terms of how long it takes for this process, this is a very gradual process. We're talking months to years rather than minutes or weeks or days. Mm-hmm. And so when we think about the potential for diagnosing this and treating this, if because it's slowly developing, if we are actively looking for this and detect it with a lot of the tests that we can talk about later, we can catch this at a point where there hasn't been a lot of damage to the heart, and we can really improve patients' lives and outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I appreciate that. And I think something that you said that is really important to think about. And I'm just going to move to the next slide with all of the different body organs and tissues that are affected by the different proteins and the way that they are creating these different amyloids. It's my understanding that all of the different ways that the protein may break apart, how it cleaves, if it cleaves at what we call a C terminal, which is like an N terminal on a peptide, or the different places it cuts, are what then open up the different parts of the protein that cause it to maybe, like that lock and key analogy, bind to portions of the tissue. And that's why it's actually potentially binding to different tissues in the body. Is that a reasonable thought?
Yeah. I mean, I think we don't have the exact kind of mechanisms for why it goes to different places, but I think that how the proteins are cut is probably part of, how they end up going to certain places in the body.
Yeah. And I know, and I appreciate the other thing that you suggested, which this slide that we're looking at right now has, kind of the key places, the key heart, kidneys, liver, nerves. Those are kind of the key tissues that we see affected. But you did say something that was really, really important, which is catching this early. So, Brandon, I was going to show the slide that has the fact that there are about, 120 different genetic variants. Is that correct? And that kind of is what's cutting the different proteins in different places and then creating these different shapes is what I understood. But the key symptoms that we have up here, and I'm connecting this to that this is actually difficult to figure out if somebody has amyloidosis, because just reading off this slide here, key symptoms to watch for are fatigue. So you're tired. I can be tired any day for any reason. And I'm going to back it out because art, I can read this off, but Art and Liz, you guys have lived this. And, our viewers are looking at this list of symptoms, but what were your symptoms? So you talked about it at the beginning of the conversation, but Liz, we haven't heard from you. So I'm going to go to you first. What did you see as Liz? What we're doing here is we've got two really important people in the room. Liz is our caregiver. She lives with Art. She lived with him for 42 years, apparently. That in itself is Art,
Okay.
And so you're a caregiver. Art is our patient advocate.
Remember.
Liz, I want to hear your voice. Liz, as symptoms go, what were you seeing? And I know you told me some stuff earlier about the stories behind what was being said with the doctors. I mean, you guys can decide what you want to talk about then. But I'm just opening that up.
Well, you have to remember that until 2023, all the symptoms that he had are so common. I watched him walk around in pain. I watched him roll around in bed because he can't sleep. His joints, this hurts, that hurts. But I was the same way he is. We just likened it. He played football all these years. We're getting older. You're going to have aches and pains. And I didn't think anything of it until he started having heart problems. And Art's one of these guys, I hate to squeal on you, but he's 70 years old. He's always taken care of his health, always, since I've met him. And so he's done all the right things, right, to maintain your heart. And then all of a sudden you find out you have heart issues. Now what? What else can you do? Then when you find out it's genetic, it was kind of, you say caregiver, I say more of a supporter. And the reason is because I'm not taking care of him, right? Maybe someday I might. But you're really there to comedy show. Yeah. But you're really there to be a support.
Yeah.
Right. And to advocate for him, because as he doesn't speak for himself, because he's got this, I don't know, it's a guy thing, I think. Little I'm not going to say machoism. That's not it. It's just like they don't talk about their health, or they hold it in, or he could be in chronic pain, never say anything to me, but I know because I'm around him all the time. So are you okay? And stuff. And we would go, and he tells a story a little different with Dr. Ferdinand, which is true. Dr. Ferdinand is the one who suggested the genetic test when we went back home, but we were sitting in his office. This is the second time we've been there. So we were there in 2018 and then back in 2023. And he did say, Art, tell me a little bit about your family history. Do you have any heart issues in the family? He said, no. And I looked at him, I said, your brother had a heart transplant so many years ago. And I was like, oh, now keep telling me. Yeah, I'm squealing because I hear the story and I'm just,
he has a heart now.
As they would say, those stinking concussions.
Yeah. And that's kind of where my support comes in.
Yeah.
Right, to be there to support his health. He would do the same for me. Well, maybe not.
Back then, even when I knew I had heart problems, back then they said, don't go in the sauna if you have heart issues.
Right.
But I was doing it anyhow.
It's non-compliant.
But I'm saying the thing is, and that's where it works out nice and all now. So, Dr. Doctors, I respect them all back in the day. But I just in the back of your mind, these guys are, there's something under the table, so to speak. In the pharmaceutical companies, I knew they was out, the healthcare system. So, what I found out now, and it works out real nice. You got to have trust and, basically you're part of a team now when you have a situation like that. And then the thing is, I rely on the medication now because it's there for a reason.
A lot of these things are what we would say are not specific, meaning they could be related to a lot of other conditions, oftentimes more common conditions. And everyone is a little bit different in terms of what the symptoms might be. It might be orthopedic things. It might be heart-related things like shortness of breath and leg swelling. Hereditary patients might have gastrointestinal symptoms, so upset stomach, diarrhea, constipation, very common just in the general population. And one of the things that means is that a lot of times people see different doctors, different specialists who have different knowledge bases for amyloidosis, and they're only seeing one piece. It's kind of blind man and the elephant. You're only seeing one part of the puzzle. So it really takes someone to step back kind of look at things holistically. So I think that's one challenge from the healthcare side. On average, people see about half a dozen doctors before they're diagnosed with this. And I think really highlights the fact that that's one of the challenges. There's not one particular sign or symptom. So hopefully we can talk a little bit more about that later too.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you kind of made me just think a little bit out of the box for a second. I hate that word actually, but you just made me think about something, which is, in our hospital settings, in our healthcare settings, we're very resource deprived right now. There's a lot of it's difficult, right? People may present with symptoms, like you said, that could be related to a multitude of disease states or a multitude of issues that aren't necessarily amyloidosis. And when I think about the integration then of wellness institutes, wellness and clinics, people that are working with other individuals that maybe hear other parts of the story and can be aware, that knowledge can be shared. Or maybe they might even be able to, the quality of wellness that we're talking about at the Wellness Institute is we're looking to elevate knowledge. Ken, we haven't heard a whole lot from you yet. One of the things thinking about HATTR and amyloidosis and the 120 different genetic variants that are out there. And then I think that this particular version affects 1 in 25 African Americans are carriers of this particular variant. You're an epidemiologist. That's your background. What do you think about all this?
Well, I think it's a really important piece, because epidemiologists are medical detectives. So we don't see individual patients, but we gather the data and say who, what, when, and why. Who's getting it? Why are they getting it? Where do they reside? All of those things. And once you start diving deep enough and separating the groups, you can see, okay, it's more prevalent in African Americans versus others. But even when you get to that point, I tell people something that Art brought up. If a community already has issues with healthcare, they're not going to be so open to hearing about a problem. That's one. Now, what I have been thinking about initially, why one way, and we haven't talked about it yet, there are tons of college students, medical students, always need, and then clinics. So one of my students just graduated from University of Pennsylvania, and for 4 years, she worked with a clinic that communities and do testing. Why not have this be one of the add-ons for the testing? Because they're already there. They already know that. So it's not an isolated thing of, oh my God, I'm going to hear this horrible outcome.
Right.
What do I do with this information? Mm-hmm. But you're being tested for maybe sickle cell anemia, whatever else. And so then there's somebody there who will do the follow-up. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a great opportunity to identify a number of diseases, especially in the African American community, that you can tap into and then have follow-up and have a greater number of ways of reaching out to. So that's one of my thoughts. Mm-hmm. I think the other thing is people often are leery of medications too. How do I know this is really going to work if there is a medication? Don't forget, this is Black History Month. And when you talk to people about health, they know that there have been times where there have been misuse in the African American community with healthcare. Mm-hmm. Whether it's the Tuskegee, event that happened. And so there are people getting around that too to say, when you say optimal wellness, even moving the needle a little bit is a major thing for people, whether it's changing your diet. If you do all, hearing that Art has been, his nutrition probably helped him a lot. because he was aware that he needed, but there's people who think, well, I can drink soda, and I can eat anything I want, or what my community normally serves. But if it's not necessarily good for you, you may not totally get rid of it, but modify it to say, maybe you need to make sure you have a salad and all these other nutritious foods and see how your body responds.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a lot of opportunities, not only for this disease, but to how we rethink, how do we reach people?
Mm-hmm.
When I start explaining things like that, the outcome may be different when you buy something. And so your expectation a little different.
Agreed. And that goes with the whole, intention, right? We're looking to ensure that the groups that we're working with, not only are we having an intention and a mission for, as you said, educating, creating trust, creating access, but then the resources there, because if we're all working together, team, and we know that art has been utilizing various tools beyond nutrition and athletics, and exercise, and good family, and people that you're surrounding yourself with, which is a harmonious community, and a great doctor who can figure out this is actually your problem. Then the other parts as well, like it's not just a red light therapy. This is a red light therapy that has been utilized by individuals that have similar issues, and it changed their outcome.
Correct.
It made a difference. It impacted their care. And so it's not just, oh yeah, sure, this is the next big thing.
Right.
This is knowledge that we're sharing with you because we care about your journey and your health and you actually living a good life.
To add one more thing to that. So these smaller clinical trials that we would like to do become even more important. Because everyone thinks you need these huge trials, but whether it's shipwaves, whether it's pulse, you want to be able to say, here's a group, even if it's a small group, does this have an impact for lupus? Does it have an impact for a certain disease? Looking at the age, these small studies can really open the door, and to compare them to the big study. What can we identify to even say, we're not necessarily saying we're helping everyone. It may not, but if we can identify one group with certain symptoms or certain outcomes, that's huge.
Absolutely.
And, so we're looking to raise the money so that when we meet and we decide, we are developing now a hierarchy of what are the diseases that we want to look at? Who are we going to partner with in the community? Whether it's the Heart Association or lupus or whatever. How do we recruit the right, people to enroll and really track them to see what the outcome is? And I don't see enough of those small ones that are used to build bigger ones. So my last point with this is when I am asked to a research paper, like let's research everyone who's using website or any of these technologies, we can't even compare them because they're not using the same thing. So even someone who's going to tease that out is important to say, can we have multiple studies to look at that to say, I did a whole research on pro athletes and looking at what they're doing, and it's all over the place. So there's some positive evidence in terms of what technologies you can use. But so my role, I would like to be able to say a year from now when we're back here, here are the results of what we found within a certain group. Here are the technologies. Post is amazing in terms of helping people with these symptoms. Another group with another set of symptoms, or again, as someone said, maybe it's not uniform. Could be that they need 2 or 3 different things for certain people, and someone else it's
personalized care.
Personalized care.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're there yet as a scientific community, because I think people are still looking for the one pill sometimes, or the one solution. And when we finally can start teasing some of that out, I think we're going to see some amazing results.
I agree. And so I'm going to I absolutely, and I'm going to piggyback on that and use that as a springboard, because you're talking about outcomes, right? And our goal is to create this opportunity for understanding what's personalized, right? But also we know that the pill, a single pill, it's not necessarily it's not targeting the root cause, the source of the issue. I think that we're in a place where we're seeing that people aren't necessarily getting better, and we're kind of looking at that and realizing that we need to approach care in a different way, and that's really a big part of the topic here. And there's a lot of topics I'd like us to come back to, but I would like to take this as a stepping off point to talk a little bit more about the adjunct technologies, the adjunct, wellness therapies that are available as well, because, we know that amyloidosis, which is the topic that we're discussing, it's the breakdown of a tetramer, a protein, misfolding, then becoming stuck in the tissues. And then basically it's not reversible.